This is MC Fireside Chats, a weekly show devoted to the outdoor hospitality industry, hosted by Brian Searl and Cara Csizmadia. You'll hear from special guests that focus on topics to help your business succeed, all backed by Modern Campground, the most innovative news source in the industry.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of MC Fireside Chats. My name is Brian Searl with Insider Perks, here as always with normally Cara, who's not here as always this morning. She's running into some internet issues, so hopefully she can join us. But super excited to bring you another episode. It's our second in a row for a series on the RV industry, outdoor recreation, trying to focus topically on that because we know even though our audience is mostly campground owners, it's super important and critical to your business as all these things kind of tie together under the outdoor hospitality umbrella. So we're welcoming back Shane Devenish from the Canadian Recreational Vehicle Association. Did I pronounce that right, Shane?
You did.
CRVA. I tried to spell it all out instead of just use the acronym. So, and then we've got Eleanore Hamm back from the president of the Canadian RVDA. And then Phil Ingrassia normally joins us from the RVDA in America, but he had a previous commitment today. And then we've got some new guests who are going to introduce themselves here. We've got Jessica Turner, who's the executive director of the Outdoor Recreation Roundtable. Did I get that right? Hopefully. And then, she lost. So we lost Jessica. Okay, so she's here. She's coming back, hopefully. And we've got Matt from Matt's RV Reviews, who is a super popular YouTube channel guy, right, Matt? You do all kinds of reviews, and you're enthusiastic going in and out of
Yes,
RVs,
thank you.
showing us all kinds of cool stuff. So we've got both of you guys on. Let's start here just because we're waiting on Jessica to get her camera back on the running. There she is. Welcome, Jessica. I introduced you. Hopefully I didn't butcher it. I just said you were from the Outdoor Recreation Roundtable and you were super important. So, yeah. And then we've got Kurt as well, too. Kurt, I forgot you. I'm so sorry. Kurt used to be on our first Wednesday of the show month and for the open discussion. We moved him here because we felt like we could give some more time to National Parks Traveler and public lands and those kinds of discussions as part of the outdoor recreation. So super excited to have Kurt here. Let's do our two new guests first. Matt, tell us a little bit about what Matt's RV Reviews is. Why is it important? What are you doing to help the industry? And how'd you get started? All those kinds of things.
Thank you. First, I want to give a shout out to Kyle Brady in the chat. What's up, brother? And then, hey, everyone. My name is Matt. I have a YouTube channel called Matt's RV Reviews. Well, I have two YouTube channels, Matt's RV Reviews Motorhomes and Matt's RV Reviews Towables. And what we do is we work with dealerships and we travel around and we review a new RV every single day. It's every other day on both channels. So tonight will be a fifth wheel. Tomorrow will be a motorhome. The next night will be a travel trailer, and then another motorhome. And we do that every single day. And yeah, I mean that's what we do. We do RV reviews, so it's pretty exciting.
What happens if you run out of RVs, Matt? Are they making them fast enough for you to?
Yeah, no. There's an abundance of RVs. I always feel bad for all my fellow YouTube content creators because I'm categorized as a YouTuber or an influencer, but I don't consider myself like that really because they have to come up with ideas for their videos. Me, I'm making 365 videos a year. There's enough different makes and models and floor plans. And let's say in the hypothetical world, there isn't enough or there's only enough. Well, then the next model year kicks over and then we just do it all over again. So it's really cool. And we're now in our fourth year doing it. And it was really funny. Like when we started, a lot of the RV manufacturers didn't like what we were doing in the beginning. Because what we do that's different from every other RV review show is we give you 3 things we like about each RV and 3 things that we don't like about it. And now I don't want to say most, but I think half of the manufacturers really embrace what we do. And it's not my opinions that we say, I call it our opinion, the RV review crew. And they read the comments and, you have the Brady's of Alliance that really listen to our customers' feedback. and they make changes to their product, and that's what people really, really like to see.
Awesome. Well, I definitely want to come back to you. I want to talk more about some of the RV reviews you've done, and we could probably maybe convince Shane and Eleanore to weigh in on what they think of RV reviews being public on YouTube and things like that. But first, I want to turn it over to, I was just going to turn it over to Jessica, and she disappeared. All right, let's start with Kurt then. Kurt, National Parks Traveler, just give us a kind of a recap of what you guys are all about, because you haven't been on the show in a couple months, and then maybe just tell us a little bit about what's on your desk as far as public lands and things that you've been writing about lately.
Yeah, boy, there's never a shortage. National Parks Traveler, Brian, as you know, we are the only news organization that focuses specifically on national parks and protected lands, primarily here in the United States. We do a little bit in Canada, and long term, hopefully, we're going to conquer the world. There's been quite a lot of news recently in terms of national parks. Just recently, the Park Service came out with their visitation numbers for 2021, and the total was 297 million, which is not bad, considering it was rebounding from COVID, and we're still kind of working our way through that. But what was really interesting and actually concerning was roughly half of those 297 million visitors went to just 25 parks: Yosemite, Yellowstone, Grand Teton, Grand Canyon, Glacier. And so there's a real disparity between the numbers of people heading out to the national park system and where they're going. I mean, when you realize that there's 423 units, soon to be 424 units of the park system, and half of the visitation is going to just 25 parks, you can imagine what the problem is.
Do you feel like that's because they're a first-time visitor to these parks and they haven't seen those places before? Are they going there over and over again? Like for me, I want to see the Grand Canyon, I want to see Yellowstone, I want to see Yosemite, but once I've seen them, I want to go someplace that's not as crowded.
That's a good question, and I wish there was a little bit more social science that went into just those types of questions. I know I love to go back to Yellowstone. I try and get back there every year, so I guess maybe I'm part of the problem. One of the superintendent up there has said, well, I've kind of lobbied him to put in a reservation system because the natural resources are being impacted, and the Park Service staff is being impacted. And he points out that, well, just 1% of our 2.2 million acres are seeing the bulk of the traffic that's coming to Yellowstone, which last year surpassed 4 million visitors. And where I try and lobby him to put in a reservation system until they can actually figure out how to manage those visitors, he says, well, don't you think that's unfair? How would you like only being able to come to Yellowstone once every 5 years? And I guess my view is that, if it protects the resource, that's okay. I can live with that. With 423 units of the park system, there are plenty of other national parks to go visit. And that part of the problem, I guess, goes back to 2016 with the National Park Service Centennial, when there was that big campaign by the National Park Foundation to find your park. And people found their parks, and it became such a problem that Park Service staff were joking that, go find another park.
I mean, we have a comment here from LinkedIn from Road Tripping with I'm going to mispronounce it with do you know, Matt? Is it Takax? I'm so sorry if I'm butchering that, but yeah, try the North Rim. And he's right. We need to find and spread out people from different parks, but there are less touristy areas of the Grand Canyon, of Yosemite, of places like that. And so, I think a lot of it's just education, isn't it?
A lot of it is education, because there are so many incredible places to go in the national park system that, if you're just going to 25, you're missing some incredible wonders. And yeah, the North Rim of the Grand Canyon is a great place to go. Part of the problem is that you don't have the lodging there that you have on the South Rim. But no, I much more enjoy the North Rim. You can go on and on with all the incredible parks to go visit. Part of the problem, I guess, is the Park Service isn't authorized to market the park system. And so,
Who is?
No,
That's a fascinating. Go ahead, Shane. Yeah.
No, is that a competition thing with the private campgrounds, or why is that?
It's just something Congress decided a long time ago, that the Park Service, is not allowed to market them. But I think, the concessionaires are out there, and, Xanterra operates in a number of national parks, and most of the top 4 concessionaires operate in various parks. And so you hope that there'd be some more marketing on their behalf. I mean, Badlands National Park is a great place to go. It's vastly overlooked. South Dakota, the state of South Dakota, could have a great marketing program with Badlands and Wind Cave and Jewel Cave and Mount Rushmore. So I think it's just public awareness, and that's one thing we try and do at the Traveler is out some of these overlooked parks. We just had a podcast this past week pointing out some of the many overlooked parks in the system and why people should take the time to go explore them.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. Shane, Eleanor, what's coming across your desk this week? We lost Jessica. She said her computer can't handle the application or something, so hopefully we'll get her back. And Cara kind of dropped off, so there's Jessica back. We'll see if it works this time. We're having internet issues all over. Like Slack was down yesterday, and it caused havoc, and all kinds of things are happening. So I don't know.
I would ask her quickly, Brian.
Yeah, let's quickly say,
Yeah.
Jessica, executive director of the Outdoor Recreation Roundtable. Super excited to have her here because ORR is really, really important, I feel like, to everything that we're doing as campground owners in the RV industry, things like that. And so, Jessica, do you want to just introduce yourself, tell us a little about ORR and what you're working on?
Sure. I do not have a degree in technology, clearly, and my computer is like 10 years old, but I am the president of Outdoor Recreation Roundtable, which is about 3 years old, and attempting, and I think doing so successfully, at bringing the entire outdoor recreation industry together, the $689 billion industry that employs 4.3 million Americans and contributes so much to state and local economies, communities, well-being, and really we've never come together before. We've never brought the, boating and fishing folks with the surfing and scuba diving, or the, camping and, paddle sports folks with the ski industry and the horseback industry, the bike industry. So we're all here, and we've had, I think massive wins over the past couple of years because we've come together on what we agree on and not those what I call trailhead conflicts. So ORR is 35 trade associations representing every single activity in our sector and over 110,000 businesses. So when you think about the breadth of that, it's really overwhelming. But when you think about what we have in common, it's about 99% overlap. We care about access, funding, and infrastructure, and getting people outside. And it's an awesome space to be in and learn about all the different segments. So I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I wanted you on the show, is because there is such overlap in our industry, and I feel like sometimes with the amount of things that campground owners and RV industry people have on their plates, sometimes that's kind of lost in the shuffle. And I know both are part of your organization. I think Arvik has a seat on the board, and obviously the RV industry does, and Phil's normally on the show, who is one of your past presidents, I think. But yeah, I mean, Matt deals with this, right? He goes in and out of these RVs that have all kinds of places for boats and fishing gear and stuff like that. All of these activities are driving people to come to campgrounds, both from a public lands perspective, from Kurt's, and a private from Shane on CRVC side, and all those kinds of things. And so what are some of the things that you're working on that has impacted parks recently? Or
well, I think just one thing is the consumer is changing, right? So they're expecting that we're talking together and working together. There's not a single next-gen consumer that wants to just do one activity. In fact, 8 out of 10 outdoor recreationists want to try another activity. So they're going to campground to bike or to kayak or to off-road or to motorcycle or to, tent camp or whatever. There's other reasons why they're camping. There's reasons why, they're taking an RV or a motorcycle. There's reasons why they're going on a boat. And so the crossover is really important. I think the consumers wants products that really speak to them. It's not, my parents' generation of you've got, you're a climber and that's what you are and that defines you. It's people wanting to experiment. They want to have adventures. They want to post about it, and they want to try everything. So we're really excited about bringing all of that together, for the market, right? How do we create better products? How do we better programs? How do we create better access? And I think for the parks, the biggest win, and Kurt, I'm sure, has talked about this, but Great American Outdoors Act, the biggest and most revenue going into parks ever, we were part of that. ORR was really instrumental in getting that done, and not just getting that done for the parks, but ensuring the Forest Service and Fish and Wildlife Service and BLM had that, because we don't just camp in parks and we don't just recreate in parks. And I think the other thing we've been able to highlight is there's other agencies like Army Corps of Engineers, Forest Service that have wonderful recreation experience and actually more possible recreation opportunities, because parks are a little bit restrictive on some of that. So we've been able to bring, I think, more funding into the parks, and also a lot of new and creative ideas about how people access the parks, how they want to access the parks, and how next gen technologies and business innovations really need to be taken into consideration as we're updating infrastructure and updating, even park passes. The consumer wants something different, and we want to bring that to the table.
Are there specific pieces of legislation that ORR is working on that you're trying to get passed now, or that you'd like to focus on in the future that you think will impact the industry?
Yeah, I hope that everyone can get on board with this as we're rolling into, I think, what could be one of the biggest opportunities for the recreation industry to really stand alone and show our power. And this is a recreation package. It's coming together in the Senate. We're going to get it done in the House, hopefully. We have an opportunity to pass it in what I will call lame duck Congress that we're about to approach as we hit midterm elections. It's bipartisan, bicameral, and it's about 10 to 12 bills that help all different types of recreation activities across the spectrum. Doesn't cost money. It's not these big heavy lifts. It's really just streamlining and getting better processes and better management, both state and national level, to ensure that recreation is a priority for these agencies. It's a priority for land managers. It's a priority for funding. We've got money now to help with infrastructure, but we need much better tools to ensure that we're doing it properly, that we're doing it right, and that we're talking to the private sector, quite frankly, and making sure that feedback is open, where the private sector can say, this is what's coming, this is the type of RV we're creating, this is, where the EV, electric vehicle sector is going, and that the agencies, have a way to take that input into consideration. So it helps with permits, helps with park passes, all the things that frustrate you every day when you're outside. This recreation bill is a wonderful, awesome attempt to fix a lot of the problems that we're facing, and to do it in a way that everyone can agree on. So will be the first time ever that recreation bills pass alone. They're not attached to a big public lands package that's much more controversial, not attached to a big funding package that's controversial. We think we're powerful enough to get our own legislation across the finish line. We hope that everyone can join us in that.
I'd love to hear from some of the other people on the group. And I know Cara and Eleanore and Shane, you're all from Canada, but I believe you have kind of your own offshoot that you're trying to start of the Canadian ORR up there. But then just from Kurt and Matt, how does the work that ORR is doing impact what you guys do? Just kind of open discussion.
I'll add on to what Jessica was saying about the Great American Outdoors Act, and it really is funneling money into the national parks to help with some backlog maintenance. And what's been nice to see is, while it seems the bulk of it is going to the Yellowstones and the Yosemites, there are some smaller parks that are benefiting from this, like Saratoga National Historic Site in upstate New York, which interprets the changing of the world guard when the colonials were able to defeat the British during the American Revolution, and they got $6 million to basically rehabilitate a loop road that goes through the historic site that helps interpret. So it's really nice to see that the money is being spread out. Of course, the big question is it's a 5-year bill, and maybe Jessica, are you already working on the extension for the next 5 years after this one expires?
Yeah, we are. We're hoping that there's enough good projects, recreation projects in particular, that we can speak to that with members of Congress across the country and say this is why we need, another round of funding. So reauthorization is always on our mind for sure.
What's interesting, Jessica also mentioned electric vehicles, and we're working on a story now to look at the national park system here in the United States to see, can they handle them? I mean, if we're seeing all the EV purchases that are being predicted, what happens when all those people turn up in a national park and say, hey, where do I plug in? And I think what we're finding through our research is that not all parks are capable of handling that type of charger system, both because of the lack of space and the lack of available electricity to funnel through it.
I was just at the Miami Boat Show, and that's where they're headed. There's more electric boats than I even knew were at the market. And then Winnebago and Airstream just launched their electric vehicles, and I was talking to them at this boat show as well. And I said, "What's the biggest problem?" They said, "No one understands that this is happening and that it can happen." Especially public land managers and state land managers, they don't get that this is to market, orders are in, vehicles are coming out, and they're going to expect that there's
So how do we better work together, like in your mind? I know Shane and Eleanor, you're in Canada, but tell us a little bit about your ORR briefly, and then kind of how you guys are or hope to work together with them to accomplish some of your goals in Canada.
You want to
Go
start,
ahead,
Shane?
Ellen.
Oh,
No, you go.
okay. Well, sure. I mean, we all ultimately took inspiration from the ORR. That's sort of where our group started, because we saw what was happening in the US, and we thought it was a great opportunity for ourselves. So I think we initially met in 2018 and really formed the group, the Canadian Outdoor Recreation Roundtable, in 2019, I think it was, and started to make a push with politicians at the beginning of 2020, and then obviously with everything that's happened, that's been put a bit on the side. But we continue to meet, and I think part of the question is always funding. How are we going to fund some of these initiatives? Where does that money come from? But ultimately, our goal is to increase the awareness of what the outdoor recreation industry is in Canada, what the economic impact of it is, as well as make sure that our governments continue to invest in, I would say, recreational infrastructure, because it's very similar to what Kirk was saying. We have our national parks, we have the big 6 or 7 where everybody goes to, and we have a lot more properties that people could be exploring, and they do need to have the electronics charging stations. They do need to update their, we always say, they need to update their infrastructure for RVs in terms of space and trees, but they also, in terms of the water services and flows. And so, we hope that we're able, as things are now opening up again in Canada, it's really just started in the last, I'm going to say, 3 or 4 weeks, that we're going to be able to get back together as a group and start to kind of relaunch some of the initiatives that we had started late 2019, 2020. Shane, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah, I'll echo your funding issue. We're not as financially vibrant as what you are all in the U.S. And so we're at the liberty of some volunteers who have other jobs, other association presidents. And, right now it's Sarah Angel from the National Marine Manufacturers Association doing it when she can. But, it's become a little challenging for her and the rest of the group over the last 2 years, because we've all had our certain issues that we needed to address. So that I'm looking forward to having that group together again, because there are a number of things that I think we need to get back to to kind of address. Jessica, I want to ask you something about the electrical issues and everything, and I know what happened to California and the generator issue as far as climate emissions and carbon footprint or whatever. I was on a call this week with a Canadian government official who told me that Canada is going to look at the same thing as California is looked at. I did my best to dissuade him, but I don't think I did very much there. But is your group talking about this now? As far as what everybody's involved with, whether it's snowmobile, ATVs, or the RV industry?
Yeah, actually, it's perfect timing. We are having a summit to talk about, snowmobile, off-road, power sports, motorcycle, RV, boat, and bike primarily, which are going electric. And it's actually going to be, sort of invite only, closed door, because I think there's a lot that we want policymakers to understand about the challenges of going electric. It's a great opportunity. And it's a great opportunity for boats on a lake, right? Like, could be really good in Lake Tahoe, where there's charging stations. You're on a lake, you're out there for a couple hours. It's not viable right now, deep sea fishing off the ocean. And I think it's the same for, some RV experiences. And so we just want to level set and explain that, this really needs to be, and it is so far market driven. It's a great market opportunity. It's great to hear that, the government's going to support the infrastructure, but it's not the end all be all. It's not going to be where everyone goes, and it's not going to happen overnight. And so there needs to be space for understanding, what's going to drive the economy, which is where we come, where ORR centers on the economic benefits of outdoor recreation, and that, let the businesses be at the table to explain how the market's going to work and what we need to help support that market, that, this administration in particular is really interested in advancing. But there's going to be other fuel alternatives, and we're also not going to make the transition overnight. I think the probably final piece that we're going to discuss, which is really important and not talked about enough and fascinating to me, is so much of funding for outdoor recreation actually comes from fossil fuels, whether it's the off-road fuel tax for the recreational trails program, Sportfish Boating Restoration Fund comes from boat fuel tax, and then obviously the Land and Water Conservation Fund comes from offshore outer continental shelf oil and gas drilling. So making that transition overnight also isn't great for recreation conservation funding. And where are those revenue or those dollars going to come from? So I think it needs to be a measured, pragmatic conversation with the experts in the room. And I'm really excited to facilitate that for our entire industry. I also think we can learn from one another. There's a lot of companies, doing both, who are going to make, traditional vehicles and expand in the electric market. And I want them to see that there's counterparts in other segments of outdoor recreation who are doing the same and be able to share lessons learned. We're bringing in Rivian and GM and companies who are putting their fleet, electrifying their fleet, who are having problems with electricity in parks and, similar things. So how can we all work together? And then how can we make sure this isn't happening to us, but that we're really leaders in what comes next? I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, it does. It's good, and we all need to work together. And it's good that you guys are talking to the vehicle manufacturers as well, getting them involved. The biggest pet peeve I have is when somebody makes a decision without having been, kind of involved in some fact finding with the people that actually need to implement things.
Yeah.
And I did thank this. This guy from the government for doing that, and they're starting to do that more, and I really appreciated the chance to to give them some input on what the implementation would challenge us as an industry, and where it's good and where we may have some problems. So.
And I think that's the benefit of ORR. Before we were set up and they had hired me, and we were a little bit more established as we are now, people just wanted a place to go to ask these questions. The agencies want to understand what's happening. They don't want to have to go to 25, 35 different organizations. They want to be able to say, does this work? Does this not work? Why doesn't it work? And I feel like ORR Canada or our, US can really facilitate those conversations. Say, you really need to talk to Polaris. They've got a new vehicle coming to market and they've found some great opportunities to, to work with a park. Or you really need to talk to, Winnebago, because they're, they're really forward thinking on this. And we're really happy to facilitate that. And then we are seeing the government's coming to us. They're asking us and they're engaged in these conversations. And maybe I'm just really optimistic, but I think it's making a difference.
Well, I definitely think it is, right? I mean, it all ties together with education, whether it's from an ORR directing the legislators to the appropriate place from the Senate or the House or whatever, same thing in Canada, or whether it's making people more aware that ORR even exists among campground owners and RV industry peoples, because there's a huge voice here already in ORR. But the more we can get these park owners on an individual level, there's 3,000 or 4,000 of them in the U.S., there's 2,000 or 3,000 in Canada, the more that they're all standing up together and having one voice, the more power that the industry has. And all that requires education, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, and Kurt's, organization obviously helps us, educate folks, and even on the park piece, Kurt, I don't know what you're hearing on the EV side, but parks have trouble taking donations. So the companies who have thought about donating electric infrastructure to parks are, they're getting turned away because there's such a complicated donation process. So it's like we can't even get, some of the opportunities that we're willing to fund off the ground. And so it just becomes something that's really important to unravel, educate on, and then create policies off of that can actually work.
Yeah, I think we're seeing some movement in that area, Jessica. Just the other week, we had a story about Rivian is helping install chargers in Yosemite National Park and
Yep.
Golden Gate National Recreation Area, and I guess there's a nonprofit organization based in California that is actually working along those lines to bring the industry to the parks and whatnot. But maybe this is one way to cut the crowding in national parks, is don't put chargers in.
Well, let's go back. Let's toss it to Matt for a second, right? Matt, you've done a ton of RV reviews. Have you done anything with an all-electric RV yet?
No, I was there at the Tampa show when they came out with it. So from my understanding, and maybe somebody can tell me if I'm wrong, that they're not even out yet. Those were all just concept vehicles. I know that Airstream had some issues with it after they did like their big debut, and with all of them, the RV industry, I always like to say it's always like 10 or 20 years behind times. I mean, what I'm seeing now is lithium-ion batteries are now only starting to really hit the towable market, and they were really only starting to get popular 3 or 4 years ago in the Class Bs. So, and those are just the batteries. So I think we're at least 10 years out for electric RVs as a whole. I think in the more immediate will be Class B vans and very small travel trailers that can get pulled behind a Rivian. I think for the next 5 years, when we see all electric RVs, that's what it's going to be. Just those two categories until they're able to get more chargers, get more of everything, and then they'll start branching out into the bigger categories. I mean, it's only been in the last year that finally all the high-end Class A gas motorhomes don't have propane in them. And we're talking diesels. The Class A, or I said gas, I meant diesels. They're now just becoming all electric with no propane. But even the gas motorhomes and the Class C motorhomes and the travel trailers and fifth wheels, they're still all using propane. And so it's just the RV industry gets scared. Well, from what I see, the manufacturers get scared with a lot of change. So I just think whereas like the car industry might be able to do it like that, it's a lot slower snap for the manufacturers, from my observation at least.
Hey Matt, if I'm an RV manufacturer, I think I'm sending you Knicks tickets for a good review.
Hey, listen, nobody's done that. We don't want to do that. But hey, if it was the right sporting event, maybe I can give somebody a positive review.
I was talking to somebody from Go Power this week, and they're putting. He gave me a stat. Is it 75%? I could be wrong on that, but 75% of the towables now have solar infrastructure already put in. You just need to put the panels on. So we're getting better. I will probably have to disagree with you on the time, Matt. I think we're a little bit better 10 or 20 years out. I think we're, it takes a while to get Titanic to turn around and
right.
think a different way, but we're getting there. And I think I think everybody in the industry really knows where we have to be, and are starting to think that way.
Yeah, and I think it's, what we're talking about too is for some boats, just because Miami, we're just coming off Miami, but some boats will never be there, with the technology we have today. I don't know what's coming in the next couple of years, but they might be hybrid, right? That might be the answer. They're when you're close to shore, can charge, great. But I think about that too with these long road trips in these rural areas. I mean, until someone feels super comfortable crossing, a state where they're not sure they're going to charge. I mean, that's, there's some danger to it. We talk about snowmobiles a lot. Snowmobiles have some of the hardest time because you're going so far in the backcountry. Like, you don't want to be stuck there, and you're in freezing temperatures. So there's, logistical things that I think consumers are rightfully nervous about. But then there's things like hybrid, kind of the middle pathway. KOA had this Campground of the Future modeling at an RV show I was at a couple years ago, where you're parking under solar chargers that help provide the infrastructure, and obviously boats have awesome opportunity for solar. So there's ways to kind of integrate all of it and not say, tomorrow we all need to be electric. And I think that's sort of our message right now to a lot of political leaders who are really excited about electric is like, it's not going to be tomorrow, but let's keep, talking about things and working on things. And I'm excited that our industry, who I think has some of the people who care the most about the outdoors and the planet in the country, no matter what side of politics you're on, we're the closest to it. We're the outdoor industry. I think we all want to see a cleaner, better future, but we're a little bit realistic because, it's not as easy as flipping a switch, to use a very bad analogy.
Yeah, it is a huge discussion that we see in the park owner groups about how am I going to wire my campground and how am I going to do that. And so I'm sure the same thing exists from the manufacturer side. I'm just kind of more ignorant to it because I'm not as involved in it as I am from the campground owner perspective, being here for over a decade or so. But we're getting a lot of things in the chat. And so maybe we continue this discussion a little bit for a second. Jacob Marler said on LinkedIn, do you think there will be a transition away from traditional RVs because of the high price of fuel? Now, obviously, if we're talking 5-10 years down the road, we have no idea what the price of fuel will be at that point. And as I think we both pointed out, these are kind of concepts now, right? So they don't exist, so the opportunity isn't there to transition away from them. But is there a discussion to be had here from any of your perspectives? Does fuel impact this and the speed with which it moves?
I don't know. We always often get asked, about consumers and what the price of fuel, what impact it has on their RV vacationing. And, over time, I'm going to say it impacts maybe how far they go, but it doesn't really impact their purchasing. It doesn't impact their using their RVs and they're wanting to vacation, right? And when you look at the overall cost, and we did an affordability study, I think last year of, RVing, fuel prices are going to impact whatever recreation activity you have, whether you're on a plane or in a boat. So if you're going to go outside, have a vacation, recreate, I think people just are willing, to count in the price of fuel as one of their expenditures. But I do see that, as the, it's a bit of the consumer is saying, yes, we do want greener methods. We do want to be able to explore other alternatives and green initiatives. So I don't know if it's as much that the price of fuel will be the driver as, what the consumer is looking for in terms of how they want to enjoy the outdoors.
Yeah, I'd agree with that wholeheartedly.
Yeah,
that's definitely what I'm hearing. Yeah, from the boat industry and other sectors is the reality is, product sales are very high. Vehicle sales are very high right now. The industry is doing wonderfully. And, there's inflation and there's cost of fuel. There's a lot of things that, traditionally would be against us. And I think we're going to see one of our best years as an industry in 2021, and it's not slowing down. So, it hasn't impacted the, at least the recreation user to the extent that, I think you would assume, and probably for the reasons, just mentioned.
Yeah, and I think we've got Kyle Brady had a comment on LinkedIn too. The pre-wired solar-ready RVs are great, but they're not built for high-capacity usage yet. It seems more of a marketing tactic than a functional feature, at least by the way RVers really want to use their rigs. So I don't know if anybody wants to comment on that, but it feels like there's a long way to go still to where they're actually being used in a high-capacity usage, and probably, I don't know if that's
I can comment on that. So
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so from, again, kind of like talking about where electric will be in the future to what is the new technology now, solar is. And I know Keystone and Jayco and a lot of manufacturers are now putting the solar on the roof, but it's only 200 watts, 100 watts. It's enough to turn the lights on and off, but it's not enough for people to actually go camping the way that a B van currently can go camping. They make these B vans that are 100% self-sufficient, don't need a generator because they run completely off solar. Part of that's because of how small it is and how compact it is and the pricing of it. You're going to spend $100,000 for a cheap B van. Might as well spend $150,000 and get it all decked out with the batteries. And so I think, I do see that they are making the right steps in the right directions. But again, I still see it being 3 years out until the main thing is trying to get the AC units to run off the batteries. That's the biggest thing that I hear from customers. And I'm sponsored by Lippert, and when we were out there, they're working on Furrion and Lippert and probably other OEMs. They're working on trying to make, I don't want to call it more efficient air conditioning units, but like less efficient air conditioning units, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. That's not the right word, but AC units that don't require as much power so that they can make it so they can run off the batteries. And then I'll see that being the big game changer.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, it's a lot of the technology continuing to evolve, but it's also consumer awareness with what you can and can't do. Like I ran into this years ago when I bought my first solar generator, and I tried to plug in like a blender to it, and it busted the whole thing, and I had to buy a whole new one. So I learned a hard lesson that way. But so yeah, as technology continues to evolve, again, I think that goes back to education and making people aware of what they can and can't do, but also responding to that demand, like Eleanor was saying, of what the consumer wants to do. And I think those are eventually going to go hand in hand. So yeah, I'm super excited to see that in the future. I'm curious, Kurt, from your perspective, and then maybe to Shane from your CCRVC side too, just briefly, because we see a lot of discussions about this electric conversion and the changeover. How much is going to be involved in this from a national park logistical standpoint? What do you feel like the funding looks like? What do you think the timetable is? And same question to you, Shane, when Kurt's done.
I think you're reading my mind, Brian, because I'm sitting here listening to a discussion, and Jessica mentioned that more and more RV sales are going on, probably at levels we've never seen before. People want to get out on the road. You're seeing bigger RVs in some instances, and if you're moving more towards EV vehicles, will the Park Service be able to keep up with that demand? Will they be able to retrofit their campgrounds? And I'm not so sure they'll be able to. Just recently, we had the Park Service release the 21st century campground design guidelines, and there were more guidelines for building new campgrounds, and I don't think we're going to see that in many national parks. And as far as whether the Park Service will decide to retrofit their campgrounds to accommodate larger RVs, to accommodate more RVs, to accommodate electric vehicle chargers, I think at this point they probably have more important things on their minds with letting the private sector in the KOAs and the privately owned campgrounds surrounding national parks to handle it. I don't know. Have you heard anything in that direction, Jessica?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's kind of what we've talked to the private campground industry about, is there's a lot of federal dollars on the table right now to electrify and to help with this transition. And if I was a private campground owner, I would be going after that infrastructure funding right now. And I think, you mentioned like the overcrowding. I just think about how important private campgrounds are, and, just the other businesses and gateway communities of a national park. And I think there will be some reliance on those places to be the hub of this type of infrastructure while they're catching up and figuring it out. It would be easier probably right now for a private campground to get the money to help support something like this than, all of the parks. So it's definitely something we're talking to the RVIC. I know Paul's, thinking about it. I know RVIA is thinking about, some of these funding streams and grants, RVDA. So they're your best advocates. They're everyone's best advocates to, help solve the puzzle of how we can do this economically for a private campground who might not be able to facilitate all the infrastructure on their own.
Hey, Brian, quick plug for something else that we're working on here at the Traveler. I'm not an RVer. I've wanted to be one. I'm looking for a pickup truck that I can put a camper on. But I've had, obviously running the National Parks Traveler website for 16 going on 17 years. And I've got an RV writer out there who's been a full-time RVer since 2007. And trying to put your finger on exactly what national park campgrounds can handle in terms of size of RVs and hookups and other amenities has been really, really difficult unless you want to spend all afternoon going website to website to website. In the next couple months, we're going to be releasing what we think is going to be the definitive guide to national park system campgrounds and RV campers and what they can handle. And I'm trying to convince my writer that we should include, are there EV stations in the parks, or where's the nearest EV station? Because while your big RV still might be gas powered, you might be towing a little EV that you want to tool around the park in, and knowing exactly where those EV stations are, I think will be invaluable. So keep an eye on that. We're going to have it in a couple months, and it's really going to be a comprehensive guide to over 70 parks and over 250 campgrounds.
Yeah, that's a fantastic feature. I'm like, I would love to see that kind of shift toward private campgrounds too. Not from your perspective, Kurt. Like, I think you're an excellent resource, and that's going to be hugely valuable to people. But I would love to see somebody from the private campground industry kind of spear that effort too. And maybe that's, Cara, I know you've been in and out of the show because of your internet connection, but is that something that's feasible maybe with CCRVC from a perspective of we just start collecting that data and providing it to consumers more?
Yeah, I mean, the sky's the limit. Build my to-do list. Let's get it done.
She sounds
Share
so
your pain.
enthusiastic to take on that extra challenge.
We'll get it done. We're already tracking tons of amenity data information for private campgrounds across the country. So I see no reason why we can't add a couple more metrics and parameters to that. Nor we certainly rely on operators to provide us really accurate information so that those listings are the most kind of reliable that they can be. And I don't know if most people don't know that we also manage the listing data at GoRVing Canada's website, gorving.ca. So that's kind of in an effort to make sure that the campground listing data across the country is really, really valuable and reliable, and kind of matching what operators provide for us. I know it's sometimes difficult with so many listing sites to be sure that that information is really accurate. So that's a priority for us, and I see no reason why we can't add a couple more checkboxes on the form.
So speaking of data specifically, I'm curious, Jessica, does some of this data that Kurt's gathering, that Cara and CCRVC might gather, that the industry associations have like RVIC and stuff like that, does that help you in your legislative efforts?
Yeah, I mean, it's important that there's experts in each of the segments, right? That there's an expert in, private campgrounds that we can go to when there's questions, experts in, the fishing space. But I think what's also really important is that we can collate all the data, and that really helped us get PPP dollars, money for our businesses, and help with transition it to seasonal. We worked with RVIC and the RVDA and RVIA specifically on making sure that campground owners, campground operators could access PPP, because it wasn't set up for seasonal businesses, and our industry tends to be really seasonal. Ski resorts, ski operators, concessionaires, couldn't access PPP at all. And we use this industry data, how many campgrounds, how many people, and also just, how many people are employed, how many people rely on this segment. And we actually changed the way that PPP, the payroll protection program during the recovery and relief a couple of years ago, how it was structured due to the data from a lot of it actually from the campground and the RV industry saying, these are dealers that are primarily making money through these months in this season. There's a seasonality to it, and they're not, able to apply for this PPP money because they don't fit within this window that the government determined. So we actually were seen as leaders in restructuring a whole, payroll protection program in the recovery and relief bill because of data from the industry. So it's incredibly important what Cara is collecting and everyone's collecting. We use that for the strangest things. Like sometimes it's to advocate and to show how powerful we are, and sometimes it's to say, hey, we really need some support here. And I think a lot of this happens behind the scenes, but that's what associations are doing on behalf of their members, and it's incredibly impactful.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. So I just want to make sure we're facilitating those conversations between each other, right? And so if there's data that you need, maybe we can pass that along to the Private Campground Association or the RV Industry Association or whatever it may be. Because the more, again, we all work together, we educate, we know what each other is doing, the better it is for everybody involved, I feel like. So I did have one more question from a comment here, and I've asked you it anyway, Jessica, but Todd Winperry says, how do we join or follow? I assume he means ORR. And so I think this kind of just, how do they get in touch with you? How do they stay up on the efforts that you're doing? Things like that.
Yeah, we're primarily B2B. So we are primarily talking to businesses and business associations. So we don't have this fancy website platform. We are on LinkedIn, Outdoor Recreation Roundtable. We're on Twitter. I'm on Twitter, Jess Wall Rec, I think. And We have Instagram account, but I would say our website and our press releases are the most impactful. We're going to do a website redesign, as you'll see with the technology issues that I have, but we've got a team now helping us with that. But I think on LinkedIn is really where we post a lot of the things happening in our industry, and through the trade associations that are, members of ours are always posting about the work they're doing with us. So I would point you certainly to LinkedIn and our Twitter.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I know there's going to be a lot of questions about this after people watch the show and things like that, because there's a lot of awareness about what ORR does, but not kind of the intricate details that you shared with us. And I think that's part of the reason that I wanted you on the show, and hopefully either you or a member of your organization can be a part of the show once a month going forward, because I'd love to touch on the different segments of how boating impacts the RV industry, how fishing impacts the RV industry, and because we've got a lot of business-to-business owners here that the more they're made aware of those things, the more I think they'll want to get involved and help.
Cool.
So. All right, what else do we want to talk about here before we end up the show? We got about 9 minutes left or so. Anything else that's come across anybody's desks that they feel is important to mention, talk about? Don't all talk at once.
Yeah, for a busy industry, there's a lot of silence here.
I'm thinking a lot about, and maybe Matt has some perspective on this, but I'm thinking coming off the biggest boat show in the world, where I was talking to some owners and they were writing orders for 2026. I'm thinking about product, supply chain, all of that, and how you keep up the momentum when we can't put these like fancy, awesome new products that people are seeing right now to market today or tomorrow. So how do you know in 4 years that you're going to want the same boat, or that the technology will be the same? Right. And Matt, I don't know if you're seeing this with RVs coming to market, or things that you're reviewing, or frustrated customers, or if everyone's just sort of in an acceptance mode that this is, you're going to have to wait 12 months for furniture, you're going to have to wait 3 months for a boat, or 3 years for a boat.
Right.
Yeah, I'm really interested in that.
Yeah. So the good news is the majority of stuff, I'd say 95%, you're looking at 3 months, 6 months, 9 months out. It's the other 5% that's tough. Like, at the I'm partnered with RVR, and they weren't selling 2022 or 2023 Airstreams. They were taking orders for 2024s. I can't speak on Leisure, but they're the same way. Leisure, they're 2 years out. They're 3 years out. So it's very few brands that are like that. And from what I understand, how it works on the dealer level is you're not locked into a price. It's kind of like, hey, you're paying this price, and if it goes up 10 or 20 grand in 2 years when it comes in, that's still the price you're going to be paying, that increase as well. But I mean, we had one customer, they literally have a leisure travel van on order, but they went ahead and bought a little Class C for the meantime. And when their leisure comes in, they'll just sell their Class C, and it's better than not having an RV. They're going to call it a $10,000 depreciation hit, maybe more, maybe less. But it's better than not camping at all for a year and a half or two.
Shane,
that's
Eleanor,
really interesting.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I apologize. We're just on a delay. Go ahead if you had something.
Yeah, it's we're hearing some extended lag times. 3 or 4 years down the road, how can you even sign a contract when you don't know how much it would cost?
Mm-hmm.
Somebody, I don't know. It's hopefully this is a real short problem, and we get back to normal soon.
Well, I think to echo Matt's point is that, 80-90% of the product is available. I mean, yes, in Canada, if you're ordering in January, you probably won't get it till May, but that's okay because you're probably not going out in January. So, as long as consumers are planning and knowing that there is a bit of time, and those specialty vehicles that you have your heart set on are going to take, we're hearing 2-3 years out. So I really liked the point that you made about having sort of an interim unit, that you can use during the time. I think our dealers are very concerned about, price increases, and are trying to ensure that consumers understand ensures that manufacturers understand that, because there are different consumer protection acts in each province, and the requirements by businesses are different in each province, and how do you address that with a customer. So back to Brian's point, it's all about education and making sure people are aware of, of what it is, what the realities are in the industry, and then hopefully we can, mitigate some of those bumps and ensure that people have still the RV they want in a positive way.
Well, and maybe this is a question that came to my mind too, and I so apologize. I'll give you 2 seconds, but this is a question that came to my mind too. Is if you're ordering a 2024 RV, are you ordering a 2022 to be delivered in 2024, or are you ordering a 2024, whatever that looks like?
Whatever it looks like.
Okay, that's what I thought. So that makes it a little bit more easier to swallow from the technology being behind standpoint, right?
Yep.
So go ahead, Jessica.
Again,
were you trying?
that's the Airstreams and the Leisures. I don't know of any other brands that have that type of lead time. I mean, they're, maybe Phoenix Cruiser. Anybody else is going to be the smaller person. As Eleanor said, you buy it today, you're going to get it, knock on wood, by May or June. The real biggest thing that I've seen is with, manufacturers. I mean, they have 400, 500 vendors for their product lines, and we've seen manufacturers switch units out. Like there's this one brand of Forest River, the impression, what we really loved about it, what was one of our positive things during the review, was that their TV, fireplace, air conditioning, microwave, refrigerator, everything was Furrion last year. And we like that because if something goes wrong, you only have one person to call. Well, 2, Forest River or Furrion, right? So I really like that. Well, now in the current ones, they have a Magic Chef, a Dometic, a Sansui, a Furrion. And personally, I don't care about Furrion or I don't care about Magic Chef, but I did like that consistency of one brand in the unit. And now they're not doing that. And I see that as a major dislike now. But on the flip side, Alliance they ran out of ladders. And if you guys haven't noticed, go to an RV dealership. Nobody has ladders anymore. But Alliance started putting these new metal ladders on the roofs. And I called up Ryan Brady. I said, hey, man, you have to keep with that, because if you've never seen up my show, I'm a portly guy, and I climb up on the roofs. And let me tell you, those ladders are struggling. Whereas when I climbed up on that new Alliance with that new ladder, I loved it. And unfortunately, it's going to cost Alliance more money, but there is some positive outcomes out of these shortages, because I can promise you this, 2 years from now, you'll see that metal ladder on everything. Just because, because I'm fat and I climb up on roofs, and nobody wants to be the one that makes the flimsy ladder for me.
Well, I'm glad that you said that, Matt, because I eat a lot of pizza, and now I'm more comfortable eating more pizza. So
hell yeah, you can eat pizza again, because now once you get the metal ladders, so there is some positive coming out of the shortages, but again, more of it's negative. And the big frustrating part with my videos is a customer will see my video and they'll see, for a great example, Grand Design was using Goodyear Endurance tires. I've now had a few Grand Designs and they didn't come in with Goodyears because of shortages. And that's the part that kind of will stink for the customer if that Goodyear Endurance tire was part of their buying decision.
Perfect. All right, we're running out of time here. I want to ask one tiny bit controversial question to Jessica. I promise I'm not putting you on the spot. You don't have to say anything bad. But I would be remiss if I let this go, because obviously the Outdoor Industry Association is very huge, and specifically from a campground owner standpoint, we know RVIC is represented in your association. RVIC does not represent all of the states in the United States. So are there opportunities for some of those state associations to work directly with ORR if they're not a part of RVIC and give you more of a voice?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're open to, all, I guess I would say, associations that represent outdoor recreation. We're trying to increase the pie and not fight over the slices. So I'm not as familiar with the state association kind of concept. I know that a lot of industries have that, and sometimes they're represented by the national, sometimes they're not. So it's something actually that has been brought up, is how do we make sure they're at the table, because we've been fighting for state directors of recreation in all of the states. We know how important they are, to governor's offices and crossing over silos. So I see that as probably the same as state associations, just being really aware of what's needed in certain states, and having that expertise, in the room would always be, valuable for sure.
Awesome. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Didn't mean to put you on the spot. I just feel like there's a lot of great organizations out there, and a lot of them are part of ARVIC and some of them aren't. So I just want to make sure that we get answers for everybody who wants to take part in your organization as much as possible. So, because it's a great thing. Okay. Do we have anything else, Cara? Anything else you can think of that we missed this week?
Well, I'm not sure, since I missed so much of the show. I don't know what you guys talk about for half the time. So
All right,
I sincerely apologize, guys. I've had nothing but issues all day with this. It's been a great day. Just living the
It's
dream.
all right. It happens to us all from time to time. So really appreciate you guys joining us for another episode of MC Fireside Chats. Again, the RV Industry Outdoor Rec Show. We will be back the 4th week in March with another episode here. I believe Shane, Eleanore, Phil, and Ingrassia will be joining us again. Hopefully Kurt, Jessica, if it's not you, hopefully somebody from your organization. Love to have RR be a continuing representative here and just kind of disseminate more of that education. Same thing with you, Matt. Welcome back if you'd like to. Love to have the consumer perspective and the things that you're seeing and stuff like that. So as a reminder, we are available on the podcast platforms after this, Google, Apple, Spotify, all those kinds of places. You can watch our archived episodes on mcfiresidechats.com. And next week, I believe we have our open discussion show again with some CEOs and executives and people like that from the campground industry. So thank you all for joining us again. Really appreciate it. And we will see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.
Thanks for watching this episode of MC Fireside Chats, hosted by Brian Searl and Cara Csizmadia. Have a suggestion for a future show, or want to see your campground or company as part of an episode? Email us at hello@moderncampground.com. Join us next week for another episode. And don't miss the latest outdoor hospitality news and commentary from around the world at moderncampground.com.